Good afternoon and welcome to ARC's weekly fireside chat. Today, we will be talking to Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascón. But before we move into that and before our guest appears, I'd like to give a few instructions as I do every week. If you're on the computer, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a ribbon, and in the ribbon, you have both the chat box and the Q&A box. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box and in the Q&A box. And as we have time, we will definitely answer your questions. So Los Angeles is moving into a new time, a time that I never thought I would see in my life, a time that I think is vitally important, especially for people of color, people who have been impacted by a criminal justice system that has been unfair and has basically ravaged our communities, not just in Los Angeles, but across our country. With our new district attorney announcing some of his new policies, I think it's important that we have an opportunity to talk and ask questions. As ARC always does, we like to be able to inform our viewers and inform people that just may not know some of these changes. District Attorney Gascón is logging on as I speak, and some of our questions will come from the town hall meeting that we had in Lancaster Prison. So for those that don't know, back in January, ARC hosted a town hall, a district attorney's town hall meeting in Lancaster Prison, where we had both of the candidates answer questions from people that were currently incarcerated. We invited former district attorney Jackie Lacey to join at that time, and she did not join, but literally both candidates answered honestly what their views were and what their positions would be. And to be a man of his word, he announced many of the policies that he shared with us while we were in Lancaster Prison. So that was one of the things that really made me happy. My personal views in terms of some of the laws that we faced and have advocated against, such as transferring juveniles to adult facilities, really impact our community. If we think about a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old who's made a horrible mistake as a young person, being sent off to adult prison for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, is that the type of country that we want to live in? Is that the type of city that we want to live in? Is that the type of county that we want to live in? And so questions like that have always been at the forefront of the work that we've done and our advocacy policies. And so to end those transfers was one of the best things that I heard of. In addition, when we think about the death penalty, and I know in many instances, people may not agree with some of these views. The death penalty is final. If you make a mistake, you can't come back from it. And if you think of some of the work that Brian Stevenson has done and so many people that are innocent that have come off of death row, do we really want to make a mistake and take a human life? Do we really want to say, well, it's worth it to make the mistake that we can't retract and come back from? And so those are some of the thoughts that I'd like to share and some of the questions that we'll be asking District Attorney Gascón once he joins. In the meantime, I'd like to share with you some of the other things that have come up from questions from people that are incarcerated. When will some of these policies take an effect, such as people that have been sentenced to enhancements? There's a gentleman by the name of John Gorberman who runs an organization called Pause for Life. Please take a moment and Google it. John basically had a sentence of 300 years to life. He was never going to get out of prison for nonviolent crimes. He was struck out and basically would have never come back. He created the Pause for Life program in Lancaster Prison. And our former Governor Brown commuted his sentence. John came home, and what do you think John did? John not only continues his work in Pause for Life, which basically saves dogs that would normally be killed. And what he does is he trains them to help vets, to help children, and to help so many other people. We'll talk more about John later. We see we have District Attorney Gascón on now. And so we like to jump right in because we only have him for 30 minutes. So District Attorney Gascon, thank you so much for joining us. I haven't seen you since the DA's town hall we hosted back in Lancaster Prison in January. Thanks again for joining us for that and for hearing the voices of our incarcerated brothers.
Good to see you, Sam.
So congratulations on your victory.
Thank you.
I'd like to go right into a question, and we have a question actually from one of the gentlemen who attended the town hall meeting in Lancaster Prison. First off, he'd like to say thank you, Mr. Gascon, for recognizing and rectifying the systemic racial disparities practice of the DA's office for years. And I'm quoting here, I'm literally reading what he said. And I also would like to thank you for being part of the town hall debate here at Lancaster State Prison on Ayard. I have served 26 years on a 19-year to life sentence for second-degree murder with the 4-year enhancement. How soon might I see freedom as a completely rehabilitated man?
Yes, so here's what we're beginning to do. We are working with the Stanford Law Clinic, with Mike Romano and some other partners. It appears that we have somewhere between 20 and 30,000 people that will qualify to be resentenced, and for many of those, it will be obviously released from prison because they have completed their base sentence and they have rehabilitated. We are beginning to identify the resources to do this work. The challenge is going to be identifying sufficient resources to be able, not only for us, but for the courts to do this work. So to give you an idea, Mr. Romano estimates, and he's one of the experts in this area, he estimates that he would have the capacity to do approximately somewhere about around 1,000 cases per year. So 20,000, that would be 20 years to do that. Obviously, that's an unacceptable state of affairs. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify where can we get funding and additional people to assist with this. We also will have to provide assistance to the court, by the way, because Mr. Roman is talking about his work, but that still doesn't alleviate the court's need to have additional staffing, because they also have to process the resentencing process once we submit. So the good news is that we're actually proactively going to do this, as opposed to what it was in the past and we're fighting it. The bad news is that we need to identify sufficient resources to get the work done. And we're doing this at a time when there are substantial cutbacks, right? So the courts, for instance, have been asked to reduce, in the worst case scenario, they're being asked to reduce as much as 40, 50%. So we cannot do anything unless we also have the support. And by support, I don't mean them not wanting to do it, but I mean the courts need to have the capacity to absorb this new work. So the first thing that we're doing is we're putting a working group. We're analyzing the scope of the work. Then we're going to try to identify funding sources and resources, both internally within government, if you will, as well as there are the potential for some private individuals to also provide some financial support. Just trying to assess how much is that going to take to get to where we want to go.
Thank you for that. And so my next question to you, and so we fielded many questions that were sent to us via internet, email, and snail mail, and put together a list of them to make sure that we try to answer everyone's questions, because so many people in the county are curious. But this is one of my own that I'd like to ask first. What does it mean to be back in Los Angeles, the place where you used to take people to jail, and now you're working alongside formerly incarcerated people and advocates like myself? What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, obviously, I had a long evolution from the time that I used to take people to jail to the time that I, rose through the ranks of management, engaged in criminal justice reform, and now in what I like to call the reimagining of our criminal justice. It's emotional for me because it's also the place where I grew up. Right? This is a place where my family lives. This is a place where, my roots are here, and it feels very good to be home. And it feels really good to be home in such a historic moment for our criminal legal system. And I'm hoping to get to the point where we actually put justice back into the criminal legal system with capital letters, because I think that we often have seen injustice come out of our system, which I readily admit that certainly I participated in that process for years. But I've also been involved in criminal justice reform and reimagining for well over a decade. So historically, it's the right moment. I feel that I'm in the right place at the right time, and I'm very, very excited about that.
Thank you so much for that. This one is, so just as I know as being a person who committed a violent crime, and being able to, both through my actions and working on myself, be able to demonstrate that I had an opportunity, or being able to demonstrate that that wasn't me anymore, but also understanding the impact my crime had on the families as well as my community. There's some discussion that changes now, or some of these changes leave behind survivors and victims of violent crime. How do you plan to work with the survivors of violent crime?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did actually 2 days ago, we announced we're starting an advisory group of survivors of violent crime. And the reason was, quite frankly, because some people are saying, well, you're ignoring the victims, and we actually are not. We're part of being thoughtful about how we handle sentencing and how do we prosecute people or not, how do we divert people. Actually, is very victim-centered. The current system that we have today victimizes people over and over again. It doesn't heal people. In fact, I would say that the majority of the men and women that are incarcerated today, if you actually look a little further back, they were victims themselves, right? And they were victims and their trauma was never attended to. So one of the things that we like to say is that, hurt people hurt other people heal other people. So part of being victim-centered is actually not just simply punishing the person that caused the harm, but it's also working around healing and creating a transformation from victimization to survivorship, right? And I believe that the people that are best qualified to guide us in that journey are people that have been there. So we're creating this advisory group of mothers and fathers and people that have been victimized, to begin to help us re-engineer how we approach victims of violent crime. The one thing that we know, and there's a lot of data on this, is that victims are not necessarily always looking for retribution or vengeance. In fact, if you ask what the scale of what victims want, they often talk about, stopping the harm. They talk about rehabilitation. They talk about creating resources for rehabilitation. So it's all these other things that the victims of violent crime often also discuss, and that unfortunately in the dialogue, especially within the criminal justice apparatus, we like to highlight sometimes the one victim that wants people just to be locked up forever, but that's not really where the majority of the victims are, and frankly, that's not what's going to work.
So thank you for that. And I think that answer is so important, because I've heard many people say, well, what about us? Because survivors of violent crime, and some of the work we do here at ARC with other organizations such as Healing Dialogues in Action, who co-sponsored the DA's town hall at Lancaster Prison. And we had this discussion even before then. So I'm really glad that you're putting that committee together, that commission together, so that those voices are heard.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we have the opportunity for you to say so here, because it's important for people in Los Angeles County to understand that we want all voices to be heard. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm hoping that people understand, like, this has been a thoughtful process.
Yes, very much so. Very driven by data. Even the whole concept of how do you take people from victimization to survivorship. There's a lot of data behind what we're trying to do here.
So in terms of people that have been sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, that have served, say, 25 years or more, will they get a second look, and what will that second look like?
Yeah, so there are really kind of two groups of people there. There are some where the crime that they were convicted for specifically calls for life without the possibility of parole. In those cases, we're going to have to seek some kind of legislative solution to that. And then there are people that are there because the DA used an enhancement to take them into a life without the possibility of parole. Or they were convicted of other crimes, and the DA also thought the sentence through special circumstances. In the cases where it was through a special circumstances approach, we're going to be looking to try to, during our resentencing efforts, see how we can get some people to be afforded the possibility of resentencing. The people that were committed to through a sentence that actually the penal code section said, being guilty of this is automatically a life without possibility of parole, is going to require some more work. And frankly, it's work that we're trying to wrap our heads around and bring some experts in sentencing to help us with this. As you well know, the problem, especially for LA County, is that we have incarcerated so many people that the numbers are just so huge. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, which is really impacting a lot of the folks that are inside the institutions. So we're looking at, how do we start expediting the release of people that have been, completed their base sentence? How do we expedite the release of people that are elderly or have a health issue that, their immune system is compromised? We're also looking at people that were convicted as a juvenile into adult prison and have not been there for a long period of time. And we're looking at all this obviously through the lens of, as a person rehabilitated, as a person ready to come back in, and then obviously ensuring, and this is where ARC and other organizations like ARC become very, very central to the answer, because we don't want to have people being released to the streets. We want people to come to a home, to a place for treatment and employment training and those things that will help our returning citizens being successful.
So thank you for that answer. And also, just for our viewers to know, in terms of both the 3,500 that were released by the governor and the 8,500 that were also released by the governor, ARC, in collaboration with many other organizations, including the Amity Foundation, A New Way of Life, All of Us and None, and others, made sure that there was a way for people to be able to transition out of incarceration, transportation, giving them transportation, making sure that housing was available, and all of the other things that are necessary. So we'll definitely be working closely as people come home, and we make sure that they have the supports that are necessary. I also want to shout out the philanthropic community that made sure the Coming Home Well program that supported all these individuals that have come home during this pandemic were well taken care of. So just want people to know that this is something that is also being communicated with. And that's the other thing I really want to tell you, that I've heard, not just from our organization, but other organizations and community activists, that the transition team and the work that's being done to make sure that there's communication, that there's support for people that are coming home is really there. But our goal during the fireside chat is to make sure that the public knows that these are not things that are just being done willy-nilly, but are really driven by data, and there's a thoughtful process behind it.
Absolutely.
A question, and so again, thank you. A next question I'd like to ask you: is it possible for judges to circumvent these new directives and continue with harsh sentencing and bail practices?
Yes, it is. At the moment, it is, because they have the legal capacity to do so. So one of the things that we're trying to approach this in phases. So phase one is, I'm just in LA County just taking a departure, if you will, from tradition, and removing the use of most enhancements, reducing incarceration, increasing diversion, bringing people back home. For some of our citizens that are currently incarcerated that qualified to come back out, But the next phase is that we need to actually create a different legislative approach to the work so that we reduce the terms of sentencing and we start getting rid of enhancements so that we actually have a legal vehicle that regardless of where we stand politically, the law is actually more humane and is less carceral in the way that we approach the work.
And this literally, thank you for the answer. And this literally puts us in line with other Western nations in terms of actually being more humane in our sentences and guidelines. So how do you plan to foster and uplift progressive district attorneys during your tenure? And can you let us know about the prosecutors, let us know more about the Prosecutors Alliance?
Yeah. So, part of my work has been for the last 10 years now, when I was in San Francisco and now, is identifying women and men around the country that agree with this approach to the work and helping people get elected, helping people that have been elected stay elected, helping them with technical support. So it's a movement that we've created nationwide. In California, there are four of us that decided that the traditional prosecutors organization was not necessarily speaking our values. So we decided to start a new one. It's called the Prosecutors Alliance. And currently there are four of us. So it's Shay Sabuddin from San Francisco. You have Tori Weber Salazar from San Joaquin. And you have Judge Beckton from, I call her judge. She's a DA, but she used to be a judge. Diana Beckton from Contra Costa County. And so it's the four of us right now. We've had a couple of other people that say they want to join, so we're evaluating and bringing them on. But our goal is to begin to create another voice in law enforcement that is not about the tough on crime approach to the work, but it's actually about a more redemptive, more rehabilitative approach, more humane approach to our work, which to the point that you may see, and to bring us in line with what most of the other industrialized nations in the world have have their approach to the work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Many of our community members have submitted questions about their cases or their loved ones' cases. How do they go about getting answers for their specific cases? Is there a way for a streamlined way for them to be able to write or submit applications or anything like that?
So we're in the process of creating a team to do this work. It's going to take probably, I suspect that around 60 days. I think that once we have a team in place, then that will be the time to send information. Just know though, that proactively we're already identifying the cases of people that will qualify. So even if you don't approach us, we will start looking at your cases. The reason why we know there are between 20 and 30,000 cases because we have actually proactively, with the help of Mr. Romano and others, have looked at CDCR numbers. So this is a work that is going to occur whether you approach us or not. If you qualify, we're going to look at it. We're just trying to figure out how to get the work done and get it through.
Another question from the community is so you have many families that want to support.
And I just want to say one thing, Sam, because obviously, if you're seeking clemency and all of that thing, you should continue to do that, of course. And if you believe that you were wrongfully convicted, I mean, all those other efforts that you may be doing, you should continue. I'm not saying don't do that and sit down and wait. But if it's just simply a resentencing process through, Prop 57, 1070D and stuff, just know that we're proactively going to start doing that work.
Okay. Thank you for that, District Attorney Gascon. In terms of juveniles that initially lost their fitness or transfer hearings and that are currently sitting in the Los Angeles Men's Central County Jail, but have not been, their cases have not been adjudicated, they have not been convicted, how do they, do their attorneys, or is there a method for those juveniles that should remain in the Department of Juvenile Justice? How do they stop their cases from moving forward in the adult system?
Yes, so I've already put in office-wide directive that we're not going to prosecute children as adults anymore. So there is a prospective and the retroactive. The prospective, obviously not bringing any new kids into the process. The retroactive is the one that we're working out through the protocols because we have to go back to the court because the court already ruled through the fitness hearing that they should be tried as an adult. So you actually have to go back to the court and get court approval to remove them from a adult proceeding and bring it back to the juvenile proceeding. Again, no need for anybody to do anything. We're doing this proactively. It's just taking time because in some cases, we're fighting a culture that believes that these children should be prosecuted as adults.
Totally understand. I've as an advocate, I've been on the stand advocating for children and not going to the adult system and know how brutal the system can be to children that have made bad choices. I want to be mindful of your time. I know you have a lot of things that you're doing, and so I want to ask you: are there any closing thoughts? And also wish you happy holidays. And for me, when you announced these directives, for me it was an early Christmas present because I've watched too many kids get prosecuted, and I see their spirits get crushed. And so for me, it was a early Christmas present. I want to thank you for that. But last thoughts before you go, because again, I want to respect your time.
Yeah, Sam, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity, and also happy holidays to you and all the women and men that are watching this, and wish you well. Just know that we're working very hard to try to get these reforms in place. Unfortunately, this is a system that moves slowly, and it's taking many years for us to get here. So it's going to take time for us to do this, but we are 100% committed. I am personally 100% committed, but so is my team and many other people in the community. So understand that we prospectively are not going to do many of the things that got many of you in prison the way that it did, and retroactively we're looking for ways to fix some of the harm that we caused in the past.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Happy holidays to you and your family. Again, thank you for the early Christmas gift for our youth that are facing these sentences, and know that we support all of these changes, and that we're here to help and make sure that this is these directives are put in place smoothly, and that we make sure that both public safety and recidivism is decreased and public safety is solid. So again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sam. You take care.
All right, you take care. Take care. God bless.
Thank you.
So, because we had District Attorney Gascón only for 30 minutes, we do have a couple of more guests. One who will be appearing shortly will be Skip Townsend of Second Call, who's been in the community and doing amazing work with Second Call, gang intervention, and working to make sure that our communities are safer. We'll also be joined by Michael Mendoza, our National Advocacy and Policy Director. A couple of questions that I'd like to answer in the chat that I saw come up. One of the questions was, do these directives only apply to Los Angeles? And yes, right now they do only apply to Los Angeles because District Attorney Gascón is the district attorney for Los Angeles County. And so these do not transfer to other jurisdictions outside of Los Angeles County. Something that might be interesting to you, the listeners, is Los Angeles County has the biggest number of commitments that go into our state prisons. 1/3 of the entire prison population comes from Los Angeles, and 1/3 of the entire prison population comes back to Los Angeles County. Currently, that population is at about 92,000. At the height of mass incarceration in the state of California, the number of people that were in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation was 178,000. So if you just think about those numbers and break it down into a third, imagine out of 58 counties, one county gets most of those. I'd like to answer some more of the questions that are in the chat box, as we will be joined by both Michael Mendoza and Skip Townsend. So in terms of how does a person apply to the advisory committee? What we'll do is we'll send these questions forward to District Attorney Gascón's office to see if we can find out if there's an application process or how this can be done. And then we'll post them on our Facebook page in order for you to be able to be informed of this information. in terms of, there's a second question here that says, thank you for holding space and thank you for the hope that you have brought to LWOPs. I appreciate, oh, this is not a question, it's a statement. Appreciate ARC and Mr. Gascon. So our purpose of this broadcast was literally just to inform our audience. Asking my technical crew that's behind the scenes, will Skip Townsend still be joining? And will Michael Mendoza still be joining? I can't see Skip or Townsend. My screen is just me right now. Oh, I see you now. My bad. That's one of them bloopers. How you doing, Skip? How you doing, Michael?
Man, I'm good, brother. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining and thank you for the work that you've done for many years in the community. You might not know this, but you're a legend. So I heard about you while I was still inside, some of the work you've been doing. Could you take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing today, brother?
Well, my name is Skip Townsend. I'm the executive director of Second Call, and what I'm doing every day is saving lives, man. So, and I'm glad you said what you just said about hearing about the work that I was doing while you were inside, because I often tell people that when I help them get into a career, when I help them get their family together, I tell them there are people I haven't even met yet who are going to come home and hope that they do not defile the water, that they do not defile the process that we're using to help individuals who are reentering into society. So my main focus was when I started, I'm a product of Bo Taylor, my mentor, and I just wanted to stop the gang violence. And I wanted the Bloods to stop killing Bloods and stop killing Crips, but it went deeper than that, helping them understand what it took to get into a career and save that career and be able to be in a career for 15, 20 years. What I had to do is what I started with was the dysfunctional family life skills, but it turned into unresolved and vicarious trauma, where we're talking about how to help the community heal. And through that healing, those individuals who are ready, we help them get into the construction career. So that's the way that I kind of solve the violence issues. I get the violent offenders and help them become whole, help them become family members and tax-paying citizens. So that's what I do, brother. And I appreciate all that you do. And I appreciate the support that we get from ARC and some of the other groups you named earlier. So I'm grateful to be in the circle, brother. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for this work you've been doing for quite some time. Michael, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to lately?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I'm actually your Director of National Advocacy at the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. You know, really great to be working with you, Sam, especially as we build out our national platform for those of us who are formerly incarcerated in the organization, to take our success stories and really continue to change the narrative on a national landscape now. So I'm really excited to have our organization step into that platform.
And thank you. Thank you, Michael. You've done some incredible work. We'll be sending out today, I believe, our end of year look back on everything that we've done from January to now. So it will also be on our website, some interesting things, some things that we were doing behind the scenes that people didn't know of. But Skip, want to jump back to you and ask you, what is the most exciting part of these new directives from District Attorney Gascón, in your opinion?
Well, number one is transparency. You know, my entire life of being born and raised in Los Angeles, I could never relate to any of the top cops because there wasn't a form of transparency. So what I see now is actually, you know, we're able to be a part of the justice system, because prior to this, it was just us. It was, you know, black and brown being charged, overly charged. You know, there are situations where I know individuals have been, you know, to have gotten a 2 or 3 year sentence. Not saying they didn't do wrong, but they were given 15 and 20 years because of the different enhancements. And, you know, I'm talking about 17 and 18-year-olds. So I like the fact that we hold our own accountable, that we want to hold each and every individual accountable for their actions, but not overcharge them. So it's great. I have a wife that did 15 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit, and I have various friends and family members who have been charged with gun enhancements and gang enhancements who have been home. So this is really hitting home for me, and I'm just grateful that the one thing, because let me answer the question, the one thing that makes me so happy is that Gascon actually did what he said he would do when he was running for office. that's the thing that I've met with him 2 or 3 times, and he had these promises, and I would go home thinking, man, this is too good to be true, but it's actually not, man. He hit the ground running. So that's the number one thing that makes me the happiest.
Absolutely, absolutely. Keeping that word, like, word is bond.
Yes.
Michael, so how do these new directives fit in line with ARC's broader work, especially, and I talked a little bit about this, especially transfer hearings and extreme sentencing?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And these directives not only fall in line with what ARC has done historically in the last 7 years, but I'll actually build off of our work. And there's something that our colleague Skip said, that I really appreciate in terms of what Gascon is doing. At the heart of what he's doing and these decisions that he has made really come from his ability to draw close, the power of proximity to the people that are directly impacted by these issues. And when you look at George Gascon and his work in San Francisco, he talks about establishing boards, especially boards and committees with people who are impacted by these issues. He did that back in San Francisco, where he worked with colleagues of ours like Malachi at Restorative Justice and for Oakland Youth, Amica, Young Women's Freedom Center, and myself and others who were on his formerly incarcerated advisory board, really talking about these issues in a way where it helped him to understand, why is ending youth transfer or extreme sentences really important to him. He understands that at the heart level. And so, having that exposure and that relationship with so many others who are making such important decisions, and how it lines up with our work, going back to 2013 when we passed Senate Bill 260 in partnership with Elizabeth Calvin and the Human Rights Watch, where we look at youth offender parole board hearings and how they look at the brain science, and how kids are more so able to mature and grow and need age-appropriate services. It's at the core of not only what ARC does, but what George Gascon is doing in LA. Ultimately, where we're trying to end the super predator myth, and the locking up of Black and brown boys that started in LA County. And so at the heart of what Gascon is doing to undo these harmful policies and what ARC is doing to continue to change that narrative through our success stories is how we continue to and hope to continue to make these moves, not just in LA, but elsewhere in other counties, more importantly. And so I think it falls nicely in line for us to continue to build off of with other organizations. But I will say that I think before moving forward in any way, we need to make sure we get it right in LA first.
I agree with you. Thank you for that, Michael. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Skip, in a broader sense, these new directives in LA County, how do they fit within your larger gang intervention work and your anti-violence work?
Well, I think it fits in just right because there are so many brothers and sisters that are incarcerated right now who are people of influence, man, and they can help to stop some of the violence in the community. There are people who are looking up to individuals who are, like I said, are doing a number of years, hundreds of years on enhancements and injunctions and things of that nature that can help us reduce the violence in the community. It takes one to know one type thing where law enforcement is reactionary. They're not invested in the community. They're not immersed in the community, but we have individuals who can actually get out there and kind of calm some of the violence. So I think that plays a major part, for the individuals who now have the opportunity to come home and right their wrongs and to be that positive direction. So I think that's the number one important part. Also just bringing back the family. I think what has happened with so many of these different enhancements is we've separated fathers from their children, and we have a lot of children out there who don't have the opportunity to grow with a mother and dad. They're growing in dysfunction, and of course they learn the dysfunction, and then they go back and they teach the dysfunction. So we will have. That's why we call it systemic. systemic issues that we're dealing with. So I think this is gonna, I'm not gonna say it's gonna right all of them, but it's gonna be the healing process for writing, making the healing portion of the systemic problem of racism overall. You know, getting some of these Black and brown brothers home, man, to sit at their rightful place and leadership of helping to guide, and definitely because they have the direction of being gone 20 and 30 years, they can come home and they know how to avoid doing 20 and 30 years. So that's what we need, man. We need healthier communities we can get with these.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brother Skip. Michael, are there national implications for the district attorney's decisions? And if there are, what are they?
Yes, I mean, there are definitely national implications. There are state implications. I mean, when you look at nationally, not only do we have George Gascón now as the LADA, but we have Biden and Kamala in the new White House administration starting next year. And there are definitely ties when we talk about ending the super predator myth, stop trying kids as adults and locking up our Black and brown youth. There's an administration that deeply understands that connection. And I obviously believe that, you know, they're going to have an eye on LA to see how we reimagine what LA looks like to undo these harms. And same with the state level, you know, but as I mentioned earlier, I think what we need to really focus on at this important point in time is to implement these directives correctly and defend them. In LA, you know, we have a lot of great work going on in LA County through Measure J. We have the Alternatives to Incarceration Initiative. These are both projects that are going to really support our communities and resource our communities in the way that will allow us to argue that on the front end and on the back end, we can appropriately not only end youth transfer, but extreme sentencing. But there's still a lot of work to be done in LA and many different moving pieces to ensure we get there. And so I would say that before anybody looks at the national implications or the state implications, that we all work hard together in LA County to implement Measure J, ATI, and really set our community and our county up to succeed for our Black and brown youth. And so there are definitely national implications, Sam, definitely state, but I think at this point in time, we need to defend Gascon's new directives and policies and implement them accordingly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Michael. We're going to close out a little early today, but before we do, Skip, you and I participate in a really unique event. I'm a newcomer to it. You're a veteran in it. It's usually the last Sunday of every month. Could you share a little bit about the peace ride that I call it the peace ride, but I'd like for you to just share a little bit about it, because I think this is a great opportunity for people to be aware of what's going on in the city of Los Angeles to bring more peace to our streets.
And I appreciate it. Thank you, Sam. But what I think people should really know is that Sunday is the most deadliest day of the week. So that's one of the reasons why it has been designated to be a Sunday peace ride, and the last Sunday, where community members from different communities, Corvette clubs, lowriders, motorcycle riders, the Nation of Islam, as well as different Christian pastors will show up with law enforcement. We all come together and ride through the city of Los Angeles, Inglewood, Compton, Pasadena, wherever we go. And it's because we want to send a message of peace. When individuals see that the Bloods and Crips are together, the Southsiders and Nathaniels are together, we got Christian pastors and Muslim imams together, it pretty much shows that we can put aside our differences. And this is the day that's most necessary, because you have individuals who have done 20, 30 years for murder, for homicide, and they're standing side by side with mothers whose children have been murdered. So I think it's very impactful, and it's useful. And I think that it's important that we all come together to talk about how do we heal, not how do we harm each other. And like I said, we have mothers of murdered children who want to emphasize the fact that we need programming, we need different resources. Incarceration is not the answer. And incarceration does not bring the child back. Stiffer sentences does not help them heal. You know, one mother told me, I'm gonna say her name, Sister out of Watts. She says she needs someone to go to prom. She needs someone to wash her car, put her trash out. She needs something because that's what she lost. She's looking at what she lost, and you know, putting someone in prison does not bring that back, does not help that, what her child would do for her. So just want to say thank you for the opportunity, brother.
Thank you, brother. And last thoughts for our audience before we close out. Again, thank you for joining us and thank you for the work that you've been doing. But Skip, your last thoughts for our audience before we close out.
Yeah, so here's my last thought, man, is that it's a three-pronged approach, man. As much as I'm out here and I'm working with the children, I'm working with changing the mindset, the behavior of everyone in the community, it also is going to take us to change the environment, because it's like taking a bath and putting on the same dirty clothes. If I work with them all day, every day, and put them back in an environment that doesn't support the change, it just doesn't work. What I see from George Gascón right now is he's changing the environment. And not only that, he's able to change the perception. The perception has now changed about our community. We are now people again. We're not thugs, we're not gang members, we're not drug dealers, we're not domestic terrorists. With George Gascón, we are now human beings. And I think those are the three things that are needed to help the community heal. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, thank you, brother. Michael, last thoughts for our audience before we close out.
I'm going to feed off of Skip's wise words. We need to come together, especially in LA County, especially right now with these directives that are monumental and will have huge impact. We need to implement this together, work together, and fight hard together. There are a lot of people that are not going to understand these policies. They're going to be afraid and angry about these policies, just as we were once when they were locking up brown and Black youth. So we need to just come as just as passionate with empathy and really defend these policies that are going to not only change LA County, but the rest of the world. So let's come together with that.
All right, thank you for that, Michael. Thank you, Skip. To our audience, I'll echo exactly what Skip and Michael said. We need to be unified in this. We need to make our cities and our counties better. Collectively, we have the ability to do this if we work together. Collectively, we have the ability to support our children so that they don't make those mistakes. And when they do, they're given an opportunity to heal and be treated as children. But we have to do that collectively. As we go into this holiday season, I just want everyone to think for a moment of those that are inside right now. They can't be with their families. COVID outbreaks are getting worse and worse inside these institutions. Call your representatives and ask them to do more. Ask them also to allow those that want the vaccine that's being given to everyone else, give the people that are inside the opportunity to take the vaccine if they want it, and do not punish those who don't want it. As I close out today, I just want to be mindful of everyone that's going through something. I want you to know that we're here for you. Take care, God bless, and stay safe.